different modes of teaching us. Teaching us first and foremost to get over our pride of whoever God would use to teach us. And then to find ourselves in the place of really gaining the insight. Magi from the east. The word is close to magicians from the east. Non-Jewish. Really not even Gentile in the sense that Jews knew Gentiles. These were folks from way out of some other place. What can they tell us about worship and worshiping God? Recall that we've already said this morning that the Epiphany is the time in which there's a breakthrough. A time in which we see something different. And what better way than to see something that we think is familiar through a whole different set of eyes. Magi from the east. People from a faraway place. There's really three ways in which the word worship is used, and three instructions or three insights, three epiphanies for us this morning about worship. For the Magi, worship begins as an intense desire. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." A longing that draws these God seekers from an entirely different context, from a place that we would not even, this small world would not even envision existing. Seekers come who study the skies for stars. After a long journey, perhaps many years of journeying to get there and finding this place. This Godward journey, this intense drawing to God. The Magi were compelled to find something more. They were looking for the more of life. They wanted to know more about the possibilities for them in God. They wanted to open themselves and their hearts, their lives, their families to something that was bigger than what they had already seen. When was the last time you said, "I really want the most out of life. I want the more of life"? When was the last time you asked God, "God, have you given me all the insights yet? Are you done with me? Or is there something more? Is there something more that I could be seeking?" Between Christmas's lull of dramatic gifts and great things and maybe a little disappointment because the magic kind of goes and the anticipating of a new year with all of its responsibilities and all of that, we're in that middle spot. Is there something more for me? The answer is yes, if we intend to worship God and be open to God in ways that we haven't been so far. Number two, worship for some is an act. I hesitated with the next part of it, but it's so true. Worship is also a show for some, or a basic requirement. I mean, what else would Christians do on Sunday morning besides worship God? And King Herod provides a great illustration of this part of worship. When the king heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. So the Magi walk in and they say, "We're here because the king," and the king is standing right there. Sometimes when people are real excited, they don't even know what they're saying. They don't know who they're offending. "The King of the Jews has been born." Wide-eyed, disturbed in all of Jerusalem. I just kind of imagine the Magi with no credentials for church growth or how churches should be run and how things should happen. They come in with a big wooden spoon and just stir the pot. You see, often authentic worship is disturbing for those of us who worship casually. You see, we're just kind of bopping in and out, and we're just kind of, we think we're there, we know what that's all about, and here, there, everywhere. All of a sudden, or trying to find our preference or get hooked up to whatever that thing is. All of a sudden, these guys come in with this, these foreigners come in with this great idea. We think the king's been born somewhere in the neighborhood here. When Herod called together the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. In Bethlehem, in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, by no means are least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel. When Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star appeared, he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go, make careful search for the child, and as soon as you find him, report to me that I too may go and worship him. This disturbance inside of Herod forms a plan in which he is attempting to use worship to serve his own ends. Use worship as a tool to get what he wants. You see, when worship is an act or a show or a requirement, it becomes a place to be seen, a place to have our needs met, a place to find attention or to be able to do favorite activities or social interaction, a place to be with others. You see, worship can be very much like a TV set. You just change the channel until you find just the right place. And when that happens, we really have to ask ourselves, are we more manipulating worship to get what we want out of it? Our assumptions, our expectations, our preferences? Or have we been struck by the fact that God is God? Do we worship? Do we worship churches and pastors and all the stuff? Or do we worship God? Then the story comes full circle because worship is finally an offering. After they had heard the king, they, which is the Magi, went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. This confirmation of something that they had been following, something they had been looking for, just filled them with tremendous joy. They are looking for the more. They weren't quite satisfied with the kind of worship that Herod was bringing to them. Although he gave them some great perspective on how to get there. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother and bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, incense or frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Overjoyed, the Magi offered themselves in three ways, according to the text. First, by bowing down, verse 11. They gave a physical response. I mean, they walked in, and the minute they saw whatever it is they saw, not knowing what they saw, they just crumpled. They just bowed down. More than we would like to admit or are comfortable with, in most cases, worship is very physical. It causes people to bow down. It causes movement. It causes hands to go up. Causes some people to dance. Wow. Eyes closed, sometimes eyes open. Singing, falling, speaking in church. Wow. Stuff we're not prepared for. Stuff that disturbs us when other people do it. Outside of our comfort zone. The Magi just didn't know any better. They hadn't been schooled on the rules of church. They just walked themselves into this situation and just got touched by God. Hearts moved. Now, I'm a noticer. I recognize that when people go to places where there's a big sporting event or loud music, a huge concert, people get crazy. And we're all really good with that. I mean, we think, the Super Bowl, all those people are getting crazy out there. Some, Coldplay, some guys don't have their shirts on, favorite team, painted across their chest, That's okay. Boy, you get a little disturbing in church, and wow. Boy, do I get communication notes from unsigned people. Yeah, it's amazing. And I love that. I mean, I've never, gone to a football game without my shirt on and painting crazy things, but I go to a concert. That's all great stuff. But the sense of the deep and excited and overfilled joy, enthusiasm of worship and its power must be seen in the church. I don't want to make fun of anyone, but I see people singing like this. Oh, get them up. Surrender to God. Would someone be looking? Close your eyes. You don't know who's seeing. My twin granddaughters, they hide and seek. This is how they hide. They don't see anything, they're hidden, right? It's amazing. God has given us this ability to really forget about the stuff that pulls us from the joy of worship. How about this? Still verse 11. Giving. I love this. They open their treasure. Most of us are busy hiding our treasure and holding on to it tightly. Isn't that funny? That's a strange thing too, isn't it? That somehow these very wealthy travelers, when they saw this, they just opened up everything and said, "It's all open. It's all there." They presented their gifts. They didn't say, "Take what you want," or worse still, "I'll give you this and I'll keep this." Something about worship that frees us. And the more that is in God's hands, the better it goes for us. I mean, you keep scratching your head over this, but if you haven't figured out what to do with all that stuff or your life, and you're still trying to do it yourself, wrestle that dude give it to God. Let God do that. You can either take this as warning or an infomercial. All of January, we're going to be talking about the stewardship of hope. A lot of people kind of find their way out of those. He's going to talk about stuff I don't want to hear. Maybe we really do need to hear it and trust in this God. Because the last thing that happens is this whole concept of obeying. They get a dream. These guys are, borderline New Age. And now these guys are born again. God's talking to them. They're receiving visions, dreams. And they get this dream that says, don't go back to that king. He don't want to worship nothing but himself. Go a different way. Giving circumstances just enough time for Joseph and Mary and the baby to escape Bethlehem, because the reason why Herod wanted to know when the star appeared is he wanted to know when the child was born. And every child in Bethlehem from 2 years and younger was slaughtered. So the Magi obeyed. What I love about their conversion is obedience was instantaneous. They didn't argue with the dream. They didn't wrangle or debate or bargain with God. They had figured out what most of us still have trouble with, and that is this. If God is worthy of our true worship, God is worthy of our true obedience. Why would we worship a God that we have difficulties in obeying in certain areas? God's opening this up. Worship me all you want, but obey what I've given you. So what happens when you don't worship? I get this question, surprisingly, I get it a lot from believers. It comes in this form. It says this: do I need this? And sometimes that happens right when the alarm goes off. It's amazing. On a Sunday morning, do I need this? I don't think that's the right question, but I think that's the question in most of our hearts, so that's what I'm going to answer. But just as you think about it, just maybe somewhere in the margin, the better question is this, and we'll talk about it in a few weeks. Is worship what God asks of me? Isn't that a better question? I mean, so I can answer that real quick. If God is asking us to worship, what else could we add to it? Right? I mean, if God's saying, what I really need from you is to worship, then, do I need this? And maybe the secondary question is, what will happen if I don't worship? Well, I've got a list, okay? If you don't, it's simple. If you don't worship, you probably will not get struck by lightning. Okay, so just want you to know that God doesn't really work that way. So if you don't worship, and if you don't worship, you won't notice anything different right away. However, without contact with God, your life loses power to be who you're supposed to be. Without connection with God, we lose the power to do two very important things. Number one, we lose the power to have confidence in God. See, if we casually worship God, and we're just kind of, we casually obey God, we casually think about God, we casually, because if the tenor of our worship is that, then so goes the rest of our lives. And with that, we lose confidence in the fact that if I'm losing confidence in God, then I'm losing confidence in the fact that I'm God's servant. I am the sent one. I am the gifted one. I am the anointed one of God, so that God can do what it is that God wants to do. See? And so, my brothers and sisters, confidence in God is lost. And number two, the power of freedom in God is also lost. Because if we casually worship God, then some of the things that we do, we're going to think that we did it. And we should get credit for that. Or we're going to think kind of like losing confidence in God and our own servanthood. We're going to think, we're going to regret the fact that we can't do anything. Being close to God draws us into a place where we have confidence in God and freedom. Check this out. God does not hold us responsible for the results of anything He asks us to do, nor does God praise us for any of the results of the things that we do. All God asks is this: be unquestionably obedient. Detach yourself from the results and the outcomes, and let God be God. Whenever your life fades or wilts or shrinks, I want you to think of that little piece of coal that sitting at the top of your barbecue pile as you're getting ready to do something this spring or summer. And invariably, I light the whole thing up. It all goes up. And then one of those coals rolls off the top. It was on fire, but it rolls off the top and it gets to the edge of the barbecue. And it sits there. And by the time I get back out there, that piece of coal is sitting there dark and cold and all by itself. You see, charcoal is worthless as long as it manages to stay out of the fire. God is asking us to get into the fire, not protect your piece of coal. It's useless as a pile of coal. Its intent was to be on fire, to burn, to know. You see, worship doesn't gain you access to God. It brings you near the fire of God. And so, in this, God is asking us to be worshipers so that we get close to the light and the heat of God, so that when we go out there, we take it with us. It's not who you are, it's whose you are in Christ that makes all the difference. Please pray with me. Lord Jesus, we ask this morning that you would move with us in an extraordinary way today. And open our hearts to what you have for us. Help us to see and know what it is that you would have for us. And lead us into your understanding of hope. Guide us this morning. Bring clarity.